Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is episode 127. It's going to be part one of the Adler House. And if you listened last week, then you know that I am doing a writing project where I'm trying to sort of sort out a longer sort of novella or novel length work. And I'm still working on that, so I'm going back to some of my older work that has never been on CryptoBiography before, polishing it up a bit, and then presenting that. So in this case, because I'm not writing it as I go, which is more typical of CryptoBiography, but I have a story that I know the general length of. This is going to be a three-parter, and this is going to be the first part of a three-part story called The Adler House. And I hope you enjoy it. It feels very much in my style, although I noticed that something stylistically that I've added or changed since then is at some point along the way, I noticed that I got tired of the he said, she said. Whenever you're in a scene with a lot of dialogue, you end up with a lot of, he said, he said, she said. If there's two or three characters, there's a lot of saids. And I've noticed that I've dropped a lot of those. That's turned into sort of a stylistic choice of mine, and I kind of like it that way. I still use he said, she said if there could be if it could be unclear at all, who's speaking. So I use it, I use more he says and she says if there's multiple people in a conversation, or if there's some description and then someone starts talking again, but I want to make it clear who's starting the talking up again. Yeah, but this is a little older story, and so I hadn't really developed that yet, and that's the one thing that feels different. But other than that, it's very much in my style. I happen to remember writing this story and enjoying writing the story and liking how it turned out too. I hope you enjoy it, and here we go. The Adler House. Anna Eriskin was 23 years old. She had graduated from the local university with a history degree specializing in early American history. She hadn't been able to find work in her field and planned to go back to school to get a teaching degree. But she had missed the cutoff this year and needed to wait the best part of a year before she could start the program. It was for this reason that she found a job opening for a child caregiver at the Adler House. Anna, who had grown up in the neighborhood, which was up on the Heights in Portland, had heard about the Adlers. They owned one of the largest and oldest houses on the hill, but they hadn't owned it for long. They had moved in perhaps 5 or 6 years ago. It was hard to pin down because the Adlers were remarkably secretive. Everyone knew that they must be remarkably wealthy to have purchased the large 3-story turn-of-the-20th century dark brick and wood house, which sprawled over a good portion of one of the largest plots of land in the Heights. It was done in an Art Nouveau style, which gave it a vaguely castle-like, fantastical air. No one saw the Adler family, to Anna's knowledge. They didn't participate in any neighborhood, school, or church events, and she herself had only seen gardeners at the house, never a family member, though she had seen rather nice Mercedes sedans pulling out of their driveway a few times. The rear windows were heavily tinted, and she could not even tell how many people were in the car. She'd put in with some employment professionals to help her find a job. As it turns out, the Adlers hired using that method. No newspaper advertising and certainly no internet postings for them. That might invite the unwashed masses in. No, Anna was contacted by Jenny, her professional job-seeking assistant, or whatever they like to call themselves, sounding a bit hesitant. "Anna, this is Jenny from Employment Placement Professionals. Is this a good time?" "Of course. Hi, Jenny. Nice to hear from you," Anna said, thinking that this had been her first contact from the company since putting in her application. She didn't mean it unkindly, however. She was starting to hurt for a job, and it was getting embarrassing, having to live with her parents. "Do you have a position for me?" "Possibly," Jenny said. "We agreed that childcare, if it was a serious position and not just a babysitting job, would be something you would consider. Is this still true?" "It is," Anna said. "What are the details?" "Well, it would be near you. You could walk to work," Jenny said. "It's for a family in your neighborhood, the Adlers." The Adlers? Anna asked, her curiosity piqued. In the big brick house? I don't know about the house. I've never seen it, Janie said. But I understand they're quite wealthy. They have a child, a son named Varric. He has a disease. Congenital, nothing contagious. They will give you the details. Would you be willing to help watch a small child with a condition? I would, but I'm no nurse, Anna said. They assure me that it is taken care of. They're only looking for someone who will watch the boy like any sitter, or child care professional, I should say. They will fill in the details. Are you willing to go talk with them? Anna didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. Just name the time. I know where they are. The time was 2 days later. Anna, who had not had any more bites on job prospects, looked forward to the Adler interview with great interest. Her parents had not had much to say when she told them she might be working for the Adlers. Apparently they were not in any greater depth of information than she was on them. She took a good long time to decide exactly what to wear. She chose a very nice cream blouse and a dark gray pencil skirt, an outfit that was her most conservative, that didn't say business instead of childcare. She wore her long, light brown and mostly straight hair up in a French twist that she decided would tell the Adlers that she had a professional attitude. She brought along a case rather than a purse, filling it with a few essentials and some copies of her resume, though she didn't doubt that the Adlers would already have it. She was ready far ahead of time and found herself agitated. She didn't want to sweat through her blouse's underarms, but it seemed her nervous energy was going to do just that. She drank a large glass of water that was half filled with ice, and decided that, as it wasn't too hot out, she could make her way to the Adlers the long way. It would be on the shady side of the hill, and would help her get her thoughts together. On the way, she thought about all she knew, or had heard, about the Adlers. It wasn't much. They had moved to the neighborhood a few years ago. They were apparently rich. Hardly anyone had seen them, and even their gardeners and other servants were spotted rarely. They drove a Mercedes, or did a couple years ago when she saw the car back out of the driveway. The house, she remembered, had a flagpole, though it didn't have a flag flying that she had seen. It was good size and had the fairly typical statue of an eagle, wings flared at the top in a gold tone. The eagle, she remembered, hadn't faced out toward the street, but rather back and to the left, almost to a corner of the building, and not even to an open area to view the flag. She thought about it for a minute and decided the eagle must be facing east. But exactly where east, she wasn't sure. Surely it hadn't simply been screwed down and left in whatever position it had come to when it was tightened down. Other than that, it was hard to remember too many unusual details. There did seem to be a bird and another eagle above the door, but under a bit of an overhang, so it was shaded. She'd never gotten a very good look at it. The front door was only visible from the street at a couple of places. The gardens with their well-manicured hedges and trees largely blocked it. When she arrived, there was little more to tell. The gate at the end of the driveway, unusual in this neighborhood, nice though it was closed. She went to the intercom box and pressed the orange talk button. Name? A voice responded. Anna Erskine, she replied. I should be expected. I'm applying for the childcare position. Please come to the garage, the voice responded. Thank you, Anna replied. There was a delay, and then the motorized gate rolled away to the left. Anna walked up the driveway. The 4-car garage had 2 doors. The right one, further from the main house, was open. As Anna approached, she saw that the garage had been altered, presumably temporarily, to look more like the interior of a house. There was a rug rolled out over the cement, and there was a large temporary wall placed between the 2 halves of the garage, taking up all but a foot or 2 at each end. Of workbenches, toolboxes, gardening implements, and other items normally found in a garage, there were none. A few simple items, a table between some overstuffed chairs, and a gray window shade made the garage look like a home interior, though one that needed more furniture if it wasn't to feel overly spacious. As she approached, she saw there was a woman, small but neat and efficient, in one of the chairs. The chair had been facing partly away from her, so she had not been visible until she moved to stand up. Anna, my name is Miss Crenshaw. I'm the head housekeeper for the Adlers. Nice to meet you, she said, though her tone didn't betray any particular gladness at meeting Anna or any other emotion that she could tell. I trust you will not object if I put down the garage door? The Adlers, as you will learn, prize their privacy. That's fine, Anna replied, though having looked around she couldn't see what anyone could find out about the Adlers looking in this space. It clearly wasn't even how the garage was set up normally. She realized that the Adlers didn't even want their job seekers seeing the interior of their main house. The garage door went down very smoothly and exceptionally quietly. The garage door was of the highest quality. Please, have a seat, Miss Crenshaw said, and motioned to the chair opposite the one she herself had been sitting in. Anna sat. Regardless of whether you are hired or not, the Adlers would like you to sign a non-disclosure agreement, saying that you will not discuss the family, this house and its grounds, or anything about your employment. She picked up a piece of paper from a small table near her chair with a pen and put them on the table between them. It looked like a nice coffee table, all of polished wood, but the height was more like that for office work. Anna wasn't sure where she had seen a table quite like it before. Perhaps it was an exceptionally lovely small antique dining table. For how long? Anna inquired, starting to look over the document. She was no expert, but it certainly seemed to be a fairly standard non-disclosure agreement. In perpetuity, Ms. Crenshaw replied. That gave Anna some pause. Aren't these usually to keep business rivals from getting company secrets and such? Anna asked. But in this case, it is to protect the Adlers and their privacy. They don't want to have to worry about people talking about them. Ever. Anna hesitated, then nodded. She'd heard that non-disclosure agreements, when they got too draconian, were often discarded by courts anyway. This wasn't about getting a legal leg up on her. This was about impressing on her how much they wanted her to remain quiet. She signed. Of course, there will not be much to tell if you are not hired, Miss Crenshaw observed, but the agreement will be in place either way. Please remember that. I will, Anna replied. She slid the paper over toward Ms. Crenshaw, who took it with the tips of her forefinger and thumb, turned it around, and confirmed that it had been signed. Very well, she said. They were a little vague on the details of the position, Anna said, but that you would fill me in. Miss Crenshaw nodded. But let me ask you a few questions about you first. Once it seems like you're a reasonable candidate, then it will make sense to give out more of the particulars of the position. That seems fair, Anna said. What do you want to know? The application seemed thorough, and the service has a complete resume on me. Indeed. This first question, well, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, Miss Crenshaw said. I was simply curious. Erskine. What kind of name is that? Anna knew immediately why Miss Crenshaw had not insisted she answer the question. It could be taken as having racist implications. Oh, it's British, at least a fairly long way back. My grandma was a genealogist in our family. She always insisted that it would have been Greek at some point, but it had been British long enough to go through a couple of spelling changes. She never got it back to going anywhere else, so let's go with British. At least until 3 generations ago when we came over to the U.S. That side of the family, anyway. The other side would have been British too, but has been in the U.S. practically forever. Miss Crenshaw was looking at her, and Anna felt a little nervous. She thought about her medium dark hair, which might or might not have been Greek. She was fair enough that any real Greek heritage was likely diluted away, though she mused she never burned quite as badly as her friends, who at least in the winter had skin as pale as hers. She wondered not for the first time what the story there really was, and she wondered why Miss Crenshaw was asking. Lovely, was all Miss Crenshaw said. She spoke with a slight accent that Anna could not place at all. She also seemed to speak quite formally with an emphasis on proper enunciation. I myself have British roots. So many people, so many interesting backgrounds. Forgive me if I can't stop myself from asking. Somehow this didn't add up for Anna, but she let it pass. I am glad that you've had a solid education. Always good to have that around the young, Miss Crenshaw said. What are your other interests? Oh, hiking, biking, walking, Anna said. Then she paused because she did not consider herself quite as much of an outdoors gal as that made her sound. Reading, of course, and when I'm with friends, karaoke, maybe dancing. Sounds quite healthy, Miss Crenshaw said, and Anna could see she was looking her up and down. Was she checking her out? Anna wasn't interested in women, and Miss Crenshaw was in her 40s. Or was this something else? Not wanting a typical fat American around the child, making a bad influence? Sure, Anna said, not knowing what else to say. She noticed Miss Crenshaw looking at her left hand. She wore, naturally, no wedding ring there. Asking about her love life would, of course, be verboten, but, of course, Miss Crenshaw might have gotten all she cared about from that glance. I understand you want the people around Varick to be a good influence, Anna said, trying to get the conversation off of this track. She was getting uncomfortable with it. Certainly, said Miss Crenshaw with a smile that looked like she didn't exercise it very much. When a family has as much as the Adlers, naturally they want every advantage they can get for their son. Anna wondered if Miss Crenshaw was thinking of adding a word in that ellipse. Money? Power? Will I meet the parents soon? Asked Anna. If you're hired on, I'm sure you'll meet them soon after, Miss Crenshaw replied. That sounds fine, Anna asked. Could you tell me a bit more about the position and about Varick? Certainly. You'll be watching Varick during the day for about 10 hours per day, 6 days per week. You can choose if you prefer Saturday or Sunday off. The family will watch the boy during the night. Tasks will include watching out for his safety, feeding and cleaning him as necessary, and other such typical childcare needs. Like entertaining him, playing with him? Anna asked. Like that, certainly, Miss Crenshaw said. Anna couldn't imagine what that little pause was for. And he is ill? Anna asked. Yes, Miss Crenshaw said. He has a rare genetic abnormality. He has ceased to grow and will soon start wasting away. There is, as of now, no cure. That is so sad, Anna said, and felt a tear just starting to rise in her eyes. Yes, Miss Crenshaw agreed. The wasting away will take some months, probably no more than a year. The family is holding out hope, and they're putting lots of funding into finding something that will reverse his decline. So, of course, they want him cared for as best as possible, right up until the end. I see, Anna said, but why not a nurse? Why a simple caregiver like me? I have no formal medical training other than a CPR class. If any medical attention is needed, be assured they can give it to him, Miss Crenshaw said. We are told that, other than the shrinking of his size, few negative effects are felt. The boy will, in some ways, seem to be quite normal to an outsider. There could be the possibility of heart attack, since the wasting away can affect the heart, but we are told that even that is rare. He will simply shrivel away until his body can no longer sustain itself. So treat him as much like a normal child as you can. Of course, Anna said, not wanting to seem like she would treat the boy like an invalid. If there is a medical emergency, we will go over the procedures if you are taken on. Okay, Anna said. There was a bit of movement in the corner, and Anna looked over. There, peering out from the end of the temporary wall, was the head of a young boy. He had medium brown hair, and Anna was hard-pressed to tell his age, as she couldn't see the rest of his body, and also because he was painfully thin. Varick? Anna asked. Miss Crenshaw turned. She saw the boy. Varick, back to the house with you, she said commandingly, almost in a yell. The boy vanished. Remember, Miss Erskine, your non-disclosure agreement, Miss Crenshaw advised. I will, Anna replied, though really she hadn't seen anything but a glimpse of the boy. The amount of secrecy that would be demanded by this job was clearly extremely high. I would never break the privacy of a young boy like that. Good, Miss Crenshaw replied with a single nod of her head. Is there anything else you want to know? Anna asked. I think we have enough at this time. We have your contact information if we have further questions, Miss Crenshaw said. Anna felt a little deflated. It felt like the interview was being cut short. Perhaps Miss Crenshaw had seen something in her she didn't like. Is there anything else you would like to know at this time? Miss Crenshaw asked. Anna thought. "No, nothing, thank you," she said. "I hope to hear from you soon." She knew that if she heard nothing, it just meant no. "Thank you for coming." Miss Crenshaw extended her hand and gave a firm handshake. Her hand was surprisingly cool. The next few days, Anna just tried to put the whole interview out of her mind, but it kept bubbling up, like a leaf in a rushing stream. Something about the whole experience felt off. And yet it had been fascinating, too. Was it just they were being so private, so secretive? She did not receive any other job opening possibilities from an employment service. That left her at home, mostly trying to read or help her parents do chores in an attempt to feel useful. She had to fight the urge to walk past the house. It would certainly kill any chances she had at the job if she was found spying on them, after having drilled into her so much about their desire for privacy. After a while, she decided to do some research on the Adler family, mainly on the internet. There wasn't much. She confirmed that they did move to the area 6 years ago. At least, that was the last time the property changed hands. But the house was in some sort of holding company. She wasn't even able to get their full names. Apparently, a lot of their property was in holding companies, because she wasn't able to find any relevant Adlers as major holders of stock of public companies or anything else interesting. She supposed that their penchant for privacy was paying them dividends. She had more luck when she turned her attention to Ms. Crenshaw. After much searching, she found out that her first name was Alice, and she was 49 years old. She seemed to be a Portland native, which led to more questions about her slight accent. And she wasn't able to find anything about her for the last 6 years. Apparently she had joined up with the Adlers soon after they acquired the house, and Alice had dropped off the radar, at least publicly. Before that, Alice had been an executive assistant to a couple of the better-known businessmen of the Portland area. Her job hadn't changed much with the Adlers, Anna surmised. And good news, she had an in with one of them. James Trumbull had been the CEO of an engineering firm that her father had been a supervisor at. In fact, she remembered they'd also lived in the Heights. And if she wasn't mistaken, Mr. Trumbull had retired shortly after her father had. Her parents had been remarkably savvy savers and investors, and took a solid income and turned it into something that put them in a nice hill in such a nice neighborhood. Most of the families she knew had much greater incomes than her parents, but her parents had simply beaten the system by not going into debt, spending only when it was wise, spending heavily when it was time to spend, and saving and investing. It didn't hurt that her mother made a good, if uneven, income as a business writer, having ghostwritten several best-selling business and sales books over her career. They had always saved that money, though after taxes they used a certain small chunk as what they called splurge money, which usually meant a trip overseas. Both of them knew James Trumbull, as in fact did Anna herself, though she had last met him in junior high at a school fundraiser. She remembered his wide smile and his firm handshake. He was a tall man, and his hand was large, dwarfing hers. Yet despite all that, the handshake managed to be friendly and not intimidating. Mr. Trumbull knew how to approach people. She was out the door and on her bicycle before she had fully thought out that she should go and try to meet with them. And that's the end of part 1. 2 more parts are coming up. I hope you enjoyed it. I did notice that there was a couple of times during the story that, that I didn't use the he said, she said, but for the most part, it is in place. This is probably about the time when I was starting to notice and starting to make the adjustments to that little bit. I don't know why I'm so so excited about finding out this little thing about myself. But anyway, I hope you're enjoying it so far. We have 2 more parts. They're pretty long, as you can see. I didn't try to chop this up into a million pieces. It just felt good to break into 3 parts. And hopefully you'll understand why, there's kind of 3 sections to the story in a general sort of sense. So, if you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter, and thank you for listening. Words and music copyright 2019 CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.